we're talking about the challenges of credit bureaus in Nigeria. We'll mention a couple, including the fact information gathering and sharing. Now, how can this challenge, as well as the others that you mentioned, be tackled?
Okay, I think the most critical challenge we have is about unique identification, ability to identify everyone. This is one problem we've been trying to deal with since we came into the market. And as a matter of fact, I can say that's one of the reasons why it has taken us so long to even come into the market as credit bureaus. So we need to really fast-track the issue of unique identification in Nigeria. Because really a situation where somebody changes name and changes address from one scenario to another is really very not helpful to us as credit bureau. It makes us to think outside the box and see what solution can we provide to still be able to address this, which is what we've been dealing with. In other economies, everybody carry a number. I mean, you carry a number.
That's like a social number.
A social security number or a unique identifier, and everybody knows you with that number. Now, once we have our national identity card project completed, that is going to really help everyone to be able to have unique identification. And that is also coming with biometrics. So it's not going to be sufficient to have your name. Once I give a different name from what I used to have, with the biometric solution or information by my face, my fingertips, and so on and so forth, all that will help. For us, what we've been dealing with now is bringing in anybody that has any form of identification that is national in outlook. So it can be national ID card, it can be a driver's license,
or international passport.
International passport, any of those is acceptable. So this is what we try to bring together to be able to identify a particular individual. But we must work towards having just one means of identification, like you see in most other developed economies. That will help us a lot. It will make transaction processing very fast. It will make, the possibility of saying this is him to be very, very high. So the validation of who that person is will be very high. Even if that person give a different name, you know that name does not correspond to the number that we are seeing or to the biometric information that we are seeing. So we must do that. And government should take this as a very, very important project. I don't know why it has taken us such a long time to be able to deal with this issue. It has a serious implication for us as an economy. It's one of the reasons that is retarding our access to credit in Nigeria, and it's also making it difficult for us to have serious planning for Nigerians as a whole. As bureaus, it's one challenge that we're dealing with, and we know that because of the cost involved, we cannot take that on as private companies. But we also know that the benefit is beyond us. It's for the generality of Nigerians and for Nigeria as a nation. Therefore, it's important that we fix this as early as possible. I know the Nigerian banking system is even looking at an option of having a financial ID. We are, okay, if the national one is not coming up, let us have something for all bank customers. So that one is also in the oven. Whichever comes up first, we are going to happily adopt them and use that to enrich the database and make things work and make our work so much efficient.
Yeah, so in what ways did you say that credit bureaus have facilitated financial inclusion in the economy?
Okay, yeah, now, one thing that we have done as an infrastructure is to reduce the stress of lenders in knowing people, in identifying customers. We have also facilitated the issue of, reducing the default rate. So that is a major plus for credit bureau infrastructure in Nigeria. If you see now, you can see that non-performing loans has dropped to below 4% in Nigeria economy. And one of the instruments that have made that to be possible is this information sharing among lenders. So now as we move on, more and more, because of what government is doing to enhance financial inclusion, more and more people will be joining the banking system. And as they are joining the banking system, there will be a lot of product development from consumers, especially on credit. Now we have banks that are giving credit cards. Now we have banks that have special desks for SMEs. All those were not there before. Now you're going to have banks dedicated, you even have finance companies dedicated to consumer loans alone. They are coming, and some of them are already here, even from outside the country. So this is what we have been, and they come because they've seen that we now have credit bureau in Nigeria. Without credit bureau, a rent credit, for instance, will not try to be here. So this is what we have been doing to be able to enhance financial inclusion. Now, anything that will lead to credit facility later, anybody that's going to be granting credit, for instance, there is mobile money going on now. Later, people have been thinking of how can this also be used for credit purpose. Now, immediately that comes in, the credit bureau infrastructure becomes the ready infrastructure to be able to support that. So this is our role as an infrastructure in Nigeria.
But policies and regulations that have been put in place by the regulatory bodies, do they in any way impact or reduce how much credit bureaus can achieve in the economy?
Yes, they do. One of the challenges that we have, because the credit bureau, we don't have a legislation. There's no act of parliament that supports what we're doing. What the central bank has done is to issue guidelines derived from their power from Section 57 of CBN Act to regulate and license credit bureaus. But what they have done is that for you to take on and submit data to credit bureaus, the borrower must give his or its consent. Now, giving consent means that we cannot possibly have all the credit information. We cannot have the information about all borrowers. We can only have information about those who have granted their consent. Consent can be given in various forms. More often than not, it's given at the point when you want to access credit. And they ask you to say, okay, I don't mind you submitting my data to a third party known as credit bureau, CRC credit bureau, for instance. So that is a constraint. In most jurisdictions, all loans, they don't need to ask to request for consent of a customer before they give information. Because if somebody is already owing and the loan is not performing, the possibility that he will give that consent is very low. I mean, he knows that that information is going to be available in the public domain. So why will he give the consent? So that's kind of challenge that we're dealing with. There's a review going on, and we are pressurizing the government to make sure that every information about all borrowers come into the bureau. Now, when you want to use that information as a lender, then you can request for consent to have that information. But let everybody who has access to credit in one form or the other have his data available in the interest of those borrowers as well. So once that is there, then the database is enlarged. As many as possible information is available, because the credit bureau infrastructure is not just for banks, even for landlords. Now, yeah, in Nigeria, you have people collecting 2-3 years rent. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they are not sure whether if they collect 6 months from you, the next 6 months you'll be able to give them. So they collect upfront a large chunk over a long period of time, waiting for you to see what's going to happen after 3 years. But when you have credit bureau, you know that if he doesn't pay, it's a loan. It's reported. The guy can get loan anywhere. I mean, so that is it. That's how we support. So we can bring down the challenges that people are facing, accessing credit. We can bring down people looking for so much money to be able to start businesses or to be able to do things that they want to do for themselves.
But how can credit bureaus mitigate the problem of accessing credit? How? Because you say you have address the challenge of accessing credit. Yeah. How can credit bureaus do this?
We do that because all the constraints that the lenders, borrowers are going through, we try to reduce it. One thing is that request for collateral is brought down where you have credit bureaus. When I know you and I know what you can do, and I've gone through your credit history, which I got from the credit bureau, I begin to look at you as having the ability to repay, having the ability to manage a loan. Therefore, that challenge of requesting for collateral is completely brought down. Now, Evina did a study and discovered that request for collateral is one of the major challenges. In fact, it's the number one challenge
of accessing credit
people have to access credit in Nigeria. So when people will now rely on their reputation and character, which is the number one rule in lending anyway. So our job is just supporting that number one rule in lending of relying on somebody's character, not on the collateral. But how can you know the character of that person? How do you support that? It's only credit bureau that can give you information about the credit history of that person. What has he been doing in the past? Because whatever he's been doing in the past, his behavior is likely to be the same way that he's going to behave in the future. So we support that. Second, we support by, reducing the time it takes to process credit. Now, within 1 hour, if you apply, a bank can tell you whether they are doing or they are not doing. In fact, there are institutions in Nigeria today who are lenders, who you can get your money within 24 hours. Before, that's not possible. There's information asymmetry in the past. you give information to a lender, it's going to cross-check those information, working from one institution to the other, trying to confirm what you are giving me, even doubting.
All in conjunction with the credit bureaus.
Exactly. But now with the credit bureau, it doesn't need to do that. No lender needs to be asking you all form of questions of where else do you bank, where else do you have credit, and so on and so forth. So within a few minutes, within 30 minutes, 1 hour, that your application comes in, they can look at the credit bureau and download every information about you. You don't need to give all those information anymore. So that speeds up processing. And that also brings down the cost of, processing loan applications. If I don't need to get somebody to be going around looking for information about my borrower, if I can just get it by, on the website of a credit bureau, then that has done quite a lot of fantastic things for us. So it reduces the constraint that lenders go through. It also reduces the constraint that borrowers also go through, because truly borrowers who are genuine now can now get loan without any serious form of collateral, and they can get it at competitive rates. That's one thing that bureau also does. With credit bureau, if you know you are good and your credit history has shown that you are good, why should I be getting loan at 20 or 25%? If you are giving a Dangote, for instance, loan at 15% because you believe Dangote will pay, then why can't you give Tunde Popoola as a consumer if I can show to you that I've also been repaying all the obligations I've had in the past? So this is what we do as a credit. This is how we facilitate access to credit for consumers and SMEs.
Some have actually argued, do banks actually have credit bureaus? Do they own credit bureaus?
Well, CRC, for instance, is owned by a consortium of banks. Okay? It's owned by a consortium of banks, the major banks in Nigeria. Because it depends on the model that you want to run. There are bureaus that are owned absolutely by government, and the central bank has its own credit bureau, for instance. I'm sure you know that. That's a public registry. Private registries are available. It can be owned by a consortium of banks. It can be owned by individuals. It can be owned by a combination of whoever. Now, what led to CRC was the fact that banks were unable to lend because they did not know their customers. And on their own, they begin to work together and say, well, how can we be sharing information among ourselves? And they commissioned a consultant to go and look at what can we do so that we can share information about these serial defaulters among ourselves. And that what was led to CRC. So today, 11 foremost Nigerian banks, together with Dun & Bradstreet, own CRC Credit Bureau. And it doesn't take, it's a limited liability company, it's a private company.
Because I was just going to ask, is there no conflict of interest?
There is no governance issues at all. There is no conflict of interest. I'm not an employee of any bank. I run the credit bureau. There's none of our staff that has anything to do. They pay for all the services we render, just like any other person will pay. And nobody will ask you to do anything because it's governed. There's a governance, high level of governance radiating, our system. So, except that they see it as an investment, they see it as a vehicle, they see it as a necessity. That's to the extent to which they are involved. But what we do, how we do what we do, is left for us as a business. In fact, in some countries, they don't even have private credit bureaus. Banks own the bureaus. In Egypt, they have only one credit bureau, and it's owned by the consortium of the banking system in Egypt, and so many other economies like that. So it depends on the model you want to run. As long as you can separate it, as long as you can put in structures and governance, and as long as there is high level of supervisory
and transparency as well.
There's so that's the way it is. It doesn't really matter who owns the bureau. What is important is that they must be able to deliver on their mandate, which is to make information available. Okay.
Now, do we have credit insurance in Nigeria? Do we really have credit insurance in Nigeria?
We do, but I don't think it's as popular. It's not as popular, and I think we need to do more on that, because I know quite some banks try to also mitigate their risk by taking on insurance to do that. But for insurance companies to also do that, they also need to evaluate that credit all over again, and those are the kind of things that slow down access to credit.
So it doesn't really fit in so much into the policy of the credit bureaus?
No, it does not. It does not. In fact, when you have a credit bureau, it reduces even the need for you to have insurance on credit, because really repayment is always it always go up like that. Immediately you have credit bureau. Why are you doing that? You want the risk to mitigate it, right? So risk the credit bureau is there to mitigate that risk, because that information is already there. You have made sure that that information is shared with everyone in the economy. So why do you want to take that on again?
So as an operator, are you satisfied with the policy framework for credit bureaus? Do you think there's a need for it to be reviewed?
Yes, there is. Not really. I mean, central bank has done wonderfully well from where we're coming from. If they had waited for an act of parliament, maybe we wouldn't have had a credit bureau even as we start. In West Africa, it's only Nigeria and Ghana that has credit bureaus. So you can see how difficult it is to establish this kind of infrastructure. But be that as it may, a legislation is important, which is going to be very comprehensive, that will protect the lenders, that will protect the credit bureau, that will also protect the borrowers, because these are consumers of credit bureau information. So we need a much more robust legislation that can support what we are doing. For instance, people ignorantly take you to court, for instance, because they believe you have reported, you have had a wrong information about them. If there's nothing to protect you against that, you have all sorts of cases in court. And whether they are right or wrong, you're already in court. And it has resource implications, it has financial implications for what you do, and so on and so forth. So I think we need that. We also need where a consumer's information, a borrower's information has been used in a way that is not supposed to be used. They must have also recourse to be able to take action and get compensation. So all those are still not so, you know, they're
it's
not
all
so
in the works.
enough
We're going to get there eventually.
So, but, you know, like I said, it's beautiful that we've started from somewhere. And everybody who has had contact with us know that it's been a fantastic job. What lenders are, looking for is already here. They are not taking decisions in the dark anymore. They are not just shooting in the dark. They are not delaying credit because they don't know. They are still trying to find out information. All that have become issue of the past. I think the way we are going to move forward is to see how we can now use this infrastructure to enhance access to credit for SMEs, to boost consumer lending, because these are things that were not possible because there was no credit bureau. You can't do consumer lending. You can't have access to, SMEs can't have access where there are no credit bureaus. Banks don't need credit bureaus for large corporates that they are doing. They always rely on their cash flow and so on and so forth. But for you to lend to millions of individuals without really getting them to sit down face to face with you, credit bureau is the solution. So we must get to a situation where we can automate credit process, where you can send in your applications. Even on weekend, your loan can be approved. Once it's automated and the data is linked to the credit bureau, that process can be done. In South Africa, they process not less than 2.5 million credits every day.
To the real sector or to the formal sector? To
the formal sector. I'm talking of to the formal sector.
What about to the real sector?
No, it's inclusive.
Okay.
Consumers, SMEs, everybody. But that is possible because these things are done auto. They're done using the technology of credit bureau and the banks being able to, hook up.
So ICT also has to play another strong role in all of this.
Yes. So, and the bureaus are ready. So what we need is just the volume of the quality of data to improve. Let all lenders have as much information as possible on every customer that they have. Let customers be able to give information about themselves because it helps them in the long run. And
of course, a suitable policy framework for.
And then, of course, suitable framework for us. And then, of course, the power issue is always a challenge for us as well. Because we run our database, people should have access to our database 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. When you have a bureau, you must be able to make sure that you have an uninterrupted power supply. People have access to your database all the time. And, that goes with a cost. As we run now in Nigeria, you have to run generating set and so on and so forth.
Well, thank you so much, Tunde, for sharing your thoughts with us on this morning. It's been quite enlightening and informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much.